Thank you all for attending today's council meeting. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
It's a motion by Mr. Guines, a second by Mr. Glavin. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, if the clerk would read the revisions, the amendments, please.
To the consent agenda, we will be removing item 5D, resolution authorizing a budget amendment for the purchase of an HP printer. We will be adding item 5LL, resolution amending the municipal budget to provide sufficient funds for the fire department to pay the city's contractual obligation under the lease purchase with Community Bank for 2 fire trucks. We will be adding item 5MM, resolution approving and accepting a change order with Blackline Corporation for capital project number 997, the Sanger Theater exterior repairs. We will be adding item 5NN, resolution authorizing entry into a cost per copy agreement with R.J. Young for a new copier to be utilized by the administration department.
Thank you, Michelle. Is there a motion to approve the amended agenda? Is a motion by Mr. Guines,
Second.
second by Mr. Glavin. Any discussion? All in favor? It's a 5-0 vote. Thank you. With that said, we'll open with the mayor's report. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I don't have any real report to make at this point in time that things are moving in the right direction except for COVID. So we're going to encourage everyone to take the precautions, do the vaccinations, do those kinds of things that we need to do. We're finalizing everything we need to do as far as the budget and the workshop to follow this afternoon. And unless Mike has something else for me to report, I think that concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are no departmental reports. It brings us to the council's report. I'll start with Mr. Glavin. That's your cue, Mr. Glavin.
Turn my ringer off. Last meeting, I was trying to ask some questions about how we work with the county, and I think it came across a little vague. So if I could ask Mr. Leonard, how does it work, Mr. Leonard, with us trying to do projects together and the relationship we have with the supervisors?
Well, I appreciate you asking, because I did think we came off a little incomplete last time. The city, as you know, through our interlocal agreement with the county, may request the support of the county for construction, repair, roads, bridges, highways, and so forth, if we need help. We do that by resolution. You've seen those resolutions. There's one on the agenda today, actually. They insist on for us doing that formally, but I can tell you that I don't remember a time since I've been here that we asked that we didn't get what we asked for. We got a little off track, I think, on talking about some projects. Jimberg Road paving, DeBees Road. These resolutions are not written in the kind of detail that would tell you everybody who does each little step in a project. So the DeBees Road paving project that we agreed to with the city of Gulfport and the county, it doesn't say who's going to stripe the road. We just depend on our road managers and the county's road managers to work those kind of details out on the scene. We've got 238 miles of road in the city. And without county's help, we're going to fail. But we have to ask them formally for the help and have to be detailed on how we ask. And if we do that, they've usually come through for us. But we don't need to get in piston contests over whose job it is to stripe the road. Once the county and the city have gotten together and paved the road, that's the kind of thing that we just need to work out between ourselves at a low level. I guess the real point is, when we ask properly, they have been very forthcoming with help. So to your point earlier, maybe we just need to ask more often.
Okay, well, I really appreciate that clarification. Again, the gist of my question, and maybe I didn't clarify it, was how do we work together on mapping out some projects that have maybe some routine maintenance components involved to it, and it's the best interest of everyone to do that. I guess you answered that. We certainly appreciate all of the supervisors, Connie Rocco, Beverly Martin, Kent Jones, and all of them for their assistance in those requests. So I appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying it. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
The only thing I have is piggybacking on that, is a lot of these, anything that I've asked for my ward, we've been able to get, but a lot of these projects we wouldn't be able to do without their help. And so we're always appreciative of any help that they're willing to give us on these projects. That's all I have for my report today.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Deming?
I don't have much either. I want to thank you guys for the help that you guys, the administration has done with getting some of these concrete roads scheduled to be repaired. And that is a project we're doing with the county. And like Nathan said, the things that we've applied for through Connie's office, she's been very gracious and forthright with helping us fund and actually with manpower to get things done. And so I know we have a couple of projects in my ward that we're requesting more help from them, and I'm sure they'll give it to us as they have in the past. Nothing else.
Thank you, Mr. Deming. Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the mayor, about the Schooner Pier, I thought they would have dug out to the 5th step. Is there a reason they did that?
Say it again.
On the Schooner Pier, when they were doing a boardwalk, they
Yeah.
dug down to the 5th step.
There's only 5 steps,
Okay, so
not 9 steps. It's only 5 steps.
at the bottom of it?
That's the bottom of it. I think that was due, we were all fooled. There's many pictures where there are 9 steps. That was some of the change orders, the redesign of that. We'd actually initially thinking that it was 9 steps deep in a footprint. Had to do some backing off and not backing off, but reducing the width of the actual to 9.5 feet, I think, isn't it? I believe that's what it was. But it's only 5 steps there. And so that's what they're proceeding on. They're doing forming right now. They've kind of, the first 500 feet is ready to pour, or getting ready to pour this week. So there's only 5 steps between there and
The bottom part is
seafood.
5 steps.
It is.
It was 300 feet to the water and sand. Are you going to push it back 300 feet to the water?
The 230 feet is where the water's going to, where the sand will be replenished once they get this stuff done.
The original was 300 feet because of the liturgical rights and repaying rights. It was always
230, I
feet.
believe.
They took that from the property owners. That's where the 300 feet came from.
Well,
Along the beach.
there's a lot of Secretary of State interaction and where Upland was and where those things are. So they're working a lot of that through right now. I don't know if Peter's here. But the bottom line, we're not really extending. It was always 5 steps, this boardwalk.
Yeah, but I mean, the rest of the seawall was 9 steps. You stepped off the last one, right?
From there to the small craft harbor is 5 steps.
Yeah.
From the lighthouse, because the road is higher, there are 9 steps.
Yeah, it's going the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's
the west.
nothing around where all the factories used to be until you get around to the
Right.
other side of the Seafood Museum.
Right.
They got some seawall there.
Yeah, I think they're about 5 or 6 steps too, till you hit the water's edge.
But and then we still going to do that 18-inch thing?
Say it again.
That 18-inch lip, you still going to do that?
1 foot knee wall to raise the profile so the sand will not have to go further. When we replenish the sand, it will be heavier sand. So again, this is a pilot project to be, evaluated. Again, which I think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the actual structure itself is about $2 million. We're planning on bringing in heavier sand and to the tune of about $1 million and 50,000 cubic yards of sand to replenish to 230 feet.
It's normally $1 million a mile, right? To run it. It's not quite, it's close to a mile.
Well, there's been a lot of analysis. Before when they replenished sand, they would dredge and create a dead zone and use that sand from the bottom right offshore. It does some of the downside. It creates a dead zone, and the sand is what do we say, 200 microns or something? What is it? So we're getting heavier sand by looking at opportunities to bring it in, truck it in, and this one contractor will spread it too. So there's been some evaluation of how we get the sand there. To build the wall first, build the knee wall also, and then bring the sand in.
How long, what's it gonna take to cut the 18 inches off when it don't work?
When it don't work, it's gonna work.
It's not gonna work. but I
Okay,
mean,
we'll agree to disagree. But anyway,
Write it down. 40
engineering.
mile an hour wind gonna put
Yeah,
the sand
the
on
reason why we
highway.
got it approved
Period.
is because this is a combination of two things: heavier sand and a higher profile. And you know, Covington engineers led us all the way through. They stepped it all the way through the Go Mesa project. And again, if it works, fine. If it doesn't work, we won't do it again. As far as keeping sand on the beach.
Well, they did the original thing in 28, they kept the sand on the beach because they created a bowl
Yeah, that's because they
basin.
didn't have, that sand was not up against the second step either.
No, it's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing. They had the seawall, had the sand 300 feet out, it never blew on the highway. I grew up on the seawall, never blew on the highway.
How many steps
When
did you
let
see?
it walk at 9 steps, you stepped off the last step to the sand.
Well, you didn't say, you saw it 5 steps. You didn't see 9 steps.
just
But
saying.
that's all it was.
Oh, it didn't blow down there. As long as you kept the sand out by the water.
That's right.
You had no problem. What you're doing is not gonna work, but it's all right. That way you're just building something we have to look at that's gonna be bad all day long.
We'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Ms. Newman?
After George's griping, I'm going to say thank you.
Griping, I didn't realize that.
Sounded like it. I'm going to say thank you for the citywide street cleaning. Praise the Lord. Thank you so much.
Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Guines.
Oh, cool. All righty. In the spirit of the conversation, Beverly Martin, she's been a joy to work with. She's worked with us quite a bit. And matter of fact, the mayor, myself, Peter, we're having a meeting with her Friday. So she's been a joy. Everything that I've asked for, I just about got it, or she tried to attempt to do it. So we appreciate our supervisors dearly. I want to thank the mayor and chief. I almost didn't recognize you, chief. You're wearing real clothes today. Appreciate you guys coming out to my ward meeting, East Biloxi Inn. Most of the residents, they were just overjoyed at the comments, the feedback, being attentive, hearing what the citizens want, and they were overjoyed. Nothing but positive feedback, and they can't wait for our next meeting to get together. We did a survey, and we had a survey. Out of the survey, I think there was one negative, but majority of the survey come back very positive about the things that we're doing in the community, the policing, the way that the officers have been doing things. So I just want to thank you two guys for coming. Like I said, the community was just totally overjoyed. Walt, just need to catch up with you after the meeting. I have two unreadiness. And that's all. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Guines. I wanted to acknowledge Robert Nail of Nail's Grounds and Irrigation. He took the initiative and mowed a median on Rue Palafox in Ward 5. I just wanted to let him know that I noticed that, and that's one less thing that Public Works has to do, so I know they're grateful. It was a nice thing to do. I'm checking just to see where we are on the noise ordinance. I know we were looking at that, Mr. Abide. As long as we're moving forward, I know there was some concerns about how enforceable it is, and we said we're going to rework that a little bit. As long as I can get some assurance we're getting closer to an ordinance in a first reading, I'll be happy.
Yeah, and we're going to address that, that's on our agenda with the county this Friday as well.
All right, thank you very much, sir. The last thing is I'd just like to announce that we'll have a Ward 5 meeting. That's being scheduled. It has been scheduled for Wednesday, September 8th at 6 o'clock. That's at the Donald Snyder Center on Pass Road. Of course, it's open to the public. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the public agenda. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing for a conditional use related to Majestic Oaks RV Resort. Mr. Creel, if you would just give us a general summary to this point, and then I'll allow the Majestic Oaks representative to speak or present for 10 minutes, followed by Mr. Hengen and any neighbors who may wish to speak. They'll have 10 minutes allotted, and then we'll go back to Mr. Doomer representing Majestic Oaks, and he'll have 5 minutes to respond. Mr. Creel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. The property that we are talking about today is the Majestic Oaks RV Park located at 7 Pass Road. There's a diagram of the park on the screen up here. The property is currently zoned NB, which allows short-term rental as a conditional use. The way that this came about, our code enforcement officer that monitors short-term rental, Frederick Menino, noticed on websites that they were advertising 3 units in the park as short-term rentals. So we informed Mr. Marcus Thomas, who manages the park, that they were in violation and needed to fill out an application for conditional use. We also issued a citation, which included four violations on the property. Mr. Thomas came in immediately and filled out the application for the conditional use, for the public hearing for the conditional use. In the meantime, we put the court case on hold until the outcome of the public hearing. The case went to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. The Planning Commission heard arguments from both sides, and before they made their decision, what we recommended as a compromise was that if the units which are located on the north end of the property next to the subdivision were a concern for those neighbors that were on the other side, that the 3 units be moved down to the south end of the property near Pass Road, which is more commercial in nature. Also within the park, they have a laundry room there, a pool house there, and some other things. And the Planning Commission went with that recommendation from the staff and amended their motion to be that we vote to approve it with the understanding that they would move those 3 units down to sites 49, 50, and 51, which are down in the what would be the southwest corner of the existing park. The recommendation from the Planning Commission then came to the City Council, and the council voted to conduct a public hearing, and that's where we are today, the public hearing.
And as I understand it today, we basically have 3 options to consider. We can deny the conditional use later on the agenda. We can approve the units requested on the application, or we can approve the units recommended by the Planning Commission. And that's the difference in the back of the property and the front of the property.
Yes, sir.
basically.
And you also have one other option, Mr. Chairman. You can actually amend the application if you feel that there's a better spot for the short-term rentals to be located, then you can actually amend it here at the council level. So you actually have 4 options.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Creel. At this time, Mr. Doomer. Thank you, sir. You'll have 10 minutes to present. Just note that I'll be keeping the time, and we'll let you know when your 10 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Doomer. I'm an attorney here with the Doomer Law Group on Howard Avenue, and I represent Majestic Oaks RV Resort in this matter. So, Mr. Creel was dead on when the city was doing an investigation or a vet of who was doing short-term rentals. It popped up, and The long and short of it was Majestic Oaks really didn't even see it as a short-term rental. As you may or may not know, Majestic Oaks has RVs pull in for a day, they stay for a couple days, they leave. And Majestic Oaks had purchased license-plated mobile RVs that look like cottages and set them there and was doing the exact same thing because it's effectively the same business model that has been lawfully operating for over 17 years. But Mr. Creel's absolutely right. As soon as Mr. Thomas found out that that was considered a short-term rental under the city, he immediately, that same day, came down and did the application. And so we're now here talking to you, ladies and gentlemen, in a hopes that you will support what Majestic Oaks has been doing for 17 years, which is doing their best to drive tourism dollars to our community. Majestic Oaks, if you've been there, hopefully you have, is a upscale tourist site in Biloxi's busy business district towards the back gate of Keesler. The resort accommodates 102 high-end RV sites, which are designed to attract tourists who have, just to be frank, a lot of money to come down and they want to spend time on the Gulf Coast. And with Biloxi's growing tourist attractions, Majestic Oaks has done very, very well. But there are still months where they were at about 70% capacity, and they thought, you know, another way to do this is to not just focus on snowbirds or people who want to come down for a week or two, but if we can have people in these same type of high-end RVs that we own, that we manage, that we take care of, then that will drive even more revenue dollars to the Gulf Coast. The resort's unique location and the fact that it is a high-end resort makes the property ideal transition between Biloxi's business district and the neighboring residential neighborhoods. And while the tourists enter into the resort, they do not increase traffic flow. If anything, the proposal that's before the ladies and gentlemen today would decrease that by at least 3, because instead of having RVs pulling in and beeping and the backing up, now you're going to have at least 3 high-end RVs that are sitting there static, that are still licensed, still insured, and still plated, just like a normal RV. Majestic Oaks maintains its site impeccably, and I hope you've all been there to see that this is a fully managed, manicured, grounded area with extremely high ratings on TripAdvisor, 5-star reviews on social media platforms, and according to social and economic impact studies done by the business, drives $1.5 million to the Gulf Coast every single year. If you turn to the back of your packet, I've included that economic impact study to see this. What Majestic Oaks is hoping to do is to keep pushing those numbers up. And frankly, because short-term rentals drive more tax dollars, that's something that Biloxi should consider when it's already doing the same thing in Majestic Oaks right now. The resort seeks to increase that by just providing 3 short-term rentals. And the Planning Commission, originally, the thought was to put them towards the back so that the RVs did not have to drive all the way through the back, at night to park there. But Majestic Oaks is fine if you want to move them to the front. The thought was just to be as considerate to the neighbors as possible. Now, as you'll see from your packet, the area is already zoned neighborhood business, and short-term rentals are expressly permitted by Article 23-3, Sub 3, Sub Z in this zone. So this is a perfect fit. The added benefit is the slightly reduced traffic flow that I just discussed, because instead of pulling a big RV in, now you're going to have 2 to 3 passenger vehicles quietly pulling in. To be honest, no one would even know that this is a short-term rental different than any other person going into the RV resort at any time except for the person staying there, who is still going to be vetted by Majestic Oaks just like they do with all the RV visitors now. Let's turn to the resort and why we want to add these short-term rental cottages. According to statistics, short-term rentals like Airbnb entice people to stay about 2.4 times longer than hotel guests. They have a bigger investment. They're paying more, and they're wanting to see all the sites that we can provide. The United States alone has 660,000 listings, some of the highest in the world. And 26 states, including Mississippi, already have taxing agreements from Airbnb, which will bring even more revenue to our city. And the cottages, unlike the name infers, are actually mobile homes. They're RVs, just like those that already reside there. The resort's operation, as well as the surrounding walls, the trees, will virtually render it unchanged from what's happening right now. But for, probably unofficially, the city, looking on the website and Mr. Thomas not knowing that there was a legal technical difference, no one would have ever even known because people come and go. Majestic Oaks is aware of a concern that this will open a floodgate. I assure you that's not the case here because it's the same type of business that's already going on, and it's situated in a non-residential based zoning district which already provides for short-term rentals. The resort's property meets all the standards of review. They're addressed in your packet point by point. And so also, one thing that we wanted to get in front of is community impact. And we know that there is about 12 houses that oppose this. So we had asked our staff to go out and just talk to the neighborhood. And if you look in your packet, you'll find out that we had 112 people sign a petition supporting what we're doing. You know what most all of them said? Aren't you already doing that? Because we are. Not one person turned our representative away. Also, we talked to the local businesses that surround us. And I've provided affidavits in there. All of them indicated that they'd like to attend, but due to COVID concerns and other prior obligations, they said they couldn't, but they hoped an affidavit would be sufficient. So if you turn to the back of your packet, you're going to find affidavits from Tony Grace with Splash. The Grace family is a well-known business family down here that has lots of input in Biloxi. Donna Langlinus, Beacon Insurance, has properties over there and fully supports this. The Royal Spragio with Coastal Select Insurance, Donna Mulder with Extra Space Storage, Danian Giddings with Rasta Caribbean Seafood, Sora Walters with Fantasy Donuts, and Muhammad Atkinson with Satisfaction Auto. Those are all prominent business families that also support this, that are surrounding us. In short, there's really no difference from what we're doing with an RV. It's still an RV. The only difference is the person who owns the RV is now the resort, Majestic Oaks, instead of someone driving in. Majestic Oaks has always been a good neighbor, and whether there's claims that that isn't the case, those may arise more from personal differences. And we accept that everyone should be entitled to quiet enjoyment of their property. But that is why Majestic Oaks takes such effort in making sure their staff, their security, their groundskeepers make sure they keep a tight rein. And to date, we don't have any complaints. And we're going to ensure that we don't have any complaints. And with the application that's before you, ladies and gentlemen, if after a year that there is a problem, or we need to move them, or we need to make any accommodations to make sure this city is protected, that's something Majestic Oaks would definitely do. I'd reserve my time for rebuttal.
Got about a minute and a half left.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hengen?
All right, I'm Wayne Hengen. I'm an attorney in Biloxi. My offices are at 979 Howard Avenue. I represent Charles and Mary Harmon, and I also speak for some 21 of their neighbors who reside mostly on James Buchanan, right next to Majestic Oaks. One resides on Corley Street and another resides on Vaughn. Some of them are here. I don't know because of COVID whether or not they are, but I would ask those that are involved in this Majestic Oaks issue with short terms, please stand. Well, these are some of our objectors. Thank you very much. These folks are adjacent to or nearby neighbors, every one of them, even Vaughn Street and Corley Street. to Majestic Oaks. They and others have signed a petition. It's part of the package that you have that we presented before the Planning Commission back in June. They object to Majestic Oaks' application for a conditional use approval to establish a short-term rental business with 3 separate RV units on their property. Here's the facts. I'm going to cite 6 of them. They cannot be disputed. Short-term rentals are and have been prohibited at Majestic Oaks. Number 2, Majestic Oaks is adjacent to a well-established residential neighborhood. Number 3, there are no lawful short-term rentals anywhere near Majestic Oaks or this neighborhood. Number 4, Majestic Oaks violated your law on short-term rentals and got caught. Number 5, Majestic Oaks did not apply for authority to establish short-term rentals on its property until after it got caught violating your law. Short-term rental issues have occupied this city's time and money for years, and it has been front-page news. It's been headline news on the TV and all over social media for years. And here's the rest of the story. No one in the rental business could possibly have been unaware of Biloxi's law on short-term rentals. No one, not even Majestic Oaks. Number 2, allowing short-term rentals in an area that has none is like spot zoning. Doesn't belong there. Number 3, allowing short-term rentals in an area that has none sets a precedent for more short-term rentals, even if it's located on Pass Road at Majestic Oaks. The purpose of zoning is to protect residences. And the kicker here is that Biloxi has hired a full-time city employee in commercial building code enforcement for a $46,450 annual salary, whose exclusive job is to find the violators of your short-term rental law. Majestic Oaks, although they didn't say it very clearly, they are still violating that law as I speak. One of the things I'm going to hand to you when I finish is this. My wife Donna went online to see if she could find out about availability and expenses at Majestic Oaks, and she could. In fact, it says here, they've been hosting this since October 2020. You've had a law in place longer than that. She actually reserved check-in for September 10 through checkout September 12, 2021. 2 guests, me and her, and there's the price, $366. Short-term rental. Not somebody driving an RV onto their property, but one they've already put there and are attracting against your law. Let me point out something else. They've never not been doing it. There have been a number of reviews. I've only pulled reviews for this August, July, June, and I didn't go back any further, but he filed his application in May, and they were doing this in May. In fact, according to his own website with Airbnb, it's been since October 2020. So the question has to be asked, considering these facts I just gave you, and also considering the rest of the story that I just gave you, why would you reward that by granting this application? What encourages the violator of your law to cease renting short-term rentals illegally and make their application and do it right? What precedent are you setting? What message are you sending to the violator? Right now, you can't do that if somebody walked into a store and stole something and walked out and got caught and said, oh gosh, I'll go ahead and pay for it, and then we forget about it. Law doesn't work that way. Not only is your code enforcement officer a big expense, but this also costs the city short-term rental taxes because they're avoiding that. Commercial water and sewer rates, it impacts homestead exemption rates and more things such as the police and fire department. And the violator is definitely willing to run the risk because he makes a lot of money doing this. In fact, they admitted, well, we're down. We want to see if we can beef it up. We'll do something illegally. You shouldn't allow that to happen. The only consequences they suffer are a fine. It's small. It's not always enforced. Ask your own court. The process is not working. Help those who are trying to find the lawbreaker. Don't reward the lawbreaker. As it stands now, the lawbreaker is encouraged to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. That's outrageous. Come on. It's not okay. It's not okay with me and my tax dollars, and I bet anybody would have to admit the same thing. It does not protect our residential neighbors to places who are making this application after being illegally performing their new business. It's not using our tax dollars economically, and it's not using them properly. We would respectfully ask that you deny Majestic Oaks' application.
There's still 2 minutes left. Mr. Hengen, if you or anybody else on this matter wish to speak, there's about 2.5 minutes left.
Afternoon. My name is Charlie Harmon. First, I'd like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to look into this application a little further. I'm sure you at council have been dealing with this short-term rental issue for a while now. Some of those I'm sure were appropriate and got approved. Some of them probably not and did not. In this case, a short-term rental in the middle of two neighborhoods is just unacceptable. It's only a matter of time before the noise cranks up, police calls have to be made, and now we've created a police matter. I don't know why we would want to do that. As property owners and taxpayers, we have a right, a legal right, to quiet enjoyment of our property. As a landlord, I put that in every single lease I write. Essentially, do not bother the neighbors. Whatever projects you might want to get involved in, whatever you want to do with your property, you can't bother the neighbors. I don't care if it's one neighbor or 10, you just can't do it. Unfortunately, there have been several examples of this management doing whatever they want, regardless of the effect to others. And please understand, I'm all for people doing whatever they want to do on their own property until it affects adversely somebody else. That's where it begins a problem. That's why zoning is in place to begin with, of course, to protect us from businesses and individuals that simply do not care about those around them. Mr. Thomas would have you believe that they've been running this park for 15 years. The park has been there for 15 years, but I personally sat with the original developer of this project when they first cleared it out. I was out in his office. He showed me the plans, showed me the variance that would exist between the end of their usage and the back of our property was quite wide and quite acceptable. In fact, they turned out to be pretty good neighbors. We never had a problem or a need to complain. Till about 2 or 3 years ago, we started to feel the brunt of actions being taken by this park. Some small, some not so much. The rentals are only the latest.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Mr. Harmon, your time is up. That concludes the 10 minutes. At this time, Mr. Doomer, you'll have 5 minutes to respond.
Okay, thank you.
Stick around. By the way, some of my colleagues asked about questions and answers. We'll close this hearing, we'll have citizens' comments, and then when we get down the agenda, this will come up again, and at that point, council members may have questions. Okay, thank you.
Once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me go over a few points that Mr. Hengen eloquently put out. So while there is a list of 20 people who had signed an opposing petition, if you look at the addresses, you'll note that they're almost comprised of only 12 houses. And interestingly, when our representative went to look and talk to people, two of the homes on this list supported the petition. So I'm not saying that there's not a dispute within the household, but if you're just looking at sheer raw numbers, there may be a few neighbors who are close. But if you look at the map that Mr. Hengen had provided to you, or to the Planning Commission, at least 4 or 5 of the houses are probably 2,500 to 3,000 feet away and immediately adjacent to a mobile home park. Not someone who would probably hear or have any issues. Now, the next part that I want to really address is Mr. Thomas definitely was in violation, but that's honestly because in his mind, there was absolutely no difference from having a spot rented to someone who drives in versus someone who pulls in a car. And as Mr. Creel correctly pointed out, as soon as that citation happened, he immediately went and filed. The more important thing is, at no point has anyone told him to stop doing this until the city council made its decision. But I can assure you that if the city council would determine that, for whatever reason, that a RV that looks like a cottage, that's licensed, insured just like another RV, is for some reason distinguishable, then that will stop. Now, the other point, though, is Mr. Hengen incorrectly said that there's been no taxes paid. Taxes are taken out by Airbnb. So that means the state of Mississippi and the city of Biloxi have been generating taxes off of those short-term rentals this entire time. There's no free ride. We acknowledge that. Now, here's the big overarching position, is being in violation of a citation does not take away your rights under the zoning code. The zoning code is very clear about what your standards are and what the ladies and gentlemen of the city council must comply with. And at no point does it say that if you're in violation, you lose your rights to petition for a conditional use. Those are two different things. That's almost like double punishing someone. And not just someone, but a reputable business who has driven over the 17-some years, probably close to $50 million of tax revenue dollars to this city. So Mr. Hengen's argument that it's somehow rewarding bad conduct is simply not the case. And not only that, spot zoning or a claim of precedent is simply untrue. That presupposes that each one of you do not have your own mind and that you cannot vote no in the future. That if somehow you agree to grant the conditional use, that you are forever bound to only say yes in the future. And that is simply not how the code is written. That's not how the standards are written. And I support each one of you to make your own decision in that. That is a red herring argument, as we say. The next one is noise complaints. Interestingly, I've been general counsel of Majestic Oaks on and off for about 9 years now, and we've never had one noise complaint that I've ever had to litigate or be made a party to. So there's no noise complaints that are happening. Now, the objectors may have issues with noise, but that's not to say that Majestic Oaks as a business is some chronic violator of this. And the proposal from the Zoning Commission was to move these short-term rentals another 1,500 feet away from the objecting parties. They're already 250 feet, so they'll be 1,750 feet away, further south next to Pass Road. So it's highly unlikely that noise is an issue. The objectors have a right to quiet enjoyment, no doubt about it. But with the precautions and the staff and the huge Majestic Oaks and the brick walls, Majestic Oaks has mitigated those damages and any kind of exposure that would be a legitimate concern. How much time do I have left?
About 35 seconds.
Okay. The final thing, sometimes people just get crosswise with each other, but it sounds a little bit like some of the objectors just have had personal ongoing issues with Majestic Oaks, and that's, something that no one wants. And Majestic Oaks will do their absolute best to work with him if they have any issues. But just because a person feels like they're affected is not a reason to grind the wheels of progress to a stop. Majestic Oaks wants to build this city, and the way to do that right now is at least allowing these three in so we can continue to drive tax revenue dollars to the Gulf Coast.
Appreciate that. As I noted earlier, we'll move down the agenda. We'll again come to this. Under the policy agenda is item 4A, and at that time, if there are any questions by the council, if the parties would stick around, you might be able to help answer those questions. That being the case, this hearing is closed. We'll move on to citizens' comments. Is there anybody on my right, your left, that would like to address the council? My right, your left. We'll allot up to 3 minutes per individual or up to 45 minutes total. Nobody on my right, your left. Anybody on my left, your right, wish to address the council? Yes, Mr. Harmon.
I have a few more thoughts.
You have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
First, I want to address the idea that an RV rental and a short-term rental is the same thing. It's truly not. An RV renter comes to you and you know what you're getting. Older folks, middle-aged, maybe a family. You're certainly not going to get the party crowd, not with an RV rental. Short-term rentals, however, you don't know what you're going to get. Anybody who can pay the freight is going to be there. Every time I hear short-term rental, all I hear is party. So they say that there's never been any noise complaints or issues into this park. I'm sorry, but I personally made 6 separate noise complaints a year or so ago about the dog park that they put at the back and the nuisance that was causing. It's not relative to this. However, there have been complaints. It's not complaint-free. Although we are directly behind the park, it is not just us that is affected by this, the entire cul-de-sac, which everyone here lives on. Since the expansion happened a year ago, the variance that once existed is all but gone. The amount of chatter and everyday noise that has increased, noise that can be heard throughout the cul-de-sac, and no one here wants to face what's coming with short-term rentals as well. The expansion was complete a year ago, and I guess we're to believe that Mr. Thomas didn't know what the zoning or code was when he made that investment. Or are we to believe he just ignored it until he wanted to get into business, make the investment, and then face whatever penalties may come later? I don't know. I have a few pictures that are going to come around that will show you the actual locations of 2 of these, where they are, what they are. Also the one that has been rented recently. There's a car park there, the air is on. So he is still using them, even though he's out of code. I just don't understand. Okay, with no respect for the neighbors, no respect for the rule of law, I don't see how this petition can be allowed. My view is it should be denied. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Anybody else on my left, your right? Mr. Hangen.
I don't have any comments, but I do want to hand out a copy of the petition as part of your package.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wish to make a comment to the council on my left, your right? Yes, ma'am. If you would, when you get to the table, if you'll sign in with your name and address, and be sure to state your name clearly so the clerk can get your name down accurately.
I'm Jessica Polite. I work with Majestic Oaks. I was asked to walk from neighborhood and business to get the petition signed. Everyone that signed it, they didn't have anything negative to say. They were on board, and the 121 signatures I got, none of them have ever had an issue with Majestic Oaks. That's it.
Okay, can you spell your last name for us?
Olite.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. And your name, sir, please?
My name is Marcus Thomas, and I'm the previous owner and now the manager of the property. Mr. Harmon alluded that I've only been there for 3 years. I've actually been there for almost 9 years managing the property. So it's been under my watch, and I take a lot of pride because it means a lot to myself, my staff in Biloxi, to have something that just got rated by Mississippi Magazine as #1 in the state of Mississippi, voted #1, not selected by the magazine. I think it was 15,000 people voted. So we run an organization that we feel is at the top of its game in the RV business. Concerning the noise of me being a lawbreaker, for those of you who know me, would obviously understand that I'm not a lawbreaker. I'm more on the other side. And ignorance is not an excuse in the court of law, but it was something that I read the ordinance and assumed that I'm running already nightly, daily rentals, and we've never had any problems. Concerning the park model RVs that are back there, as far as the concern of people and partying in the unit only sleeps 2 adults and 2 children is the max occupancy in the unit. It has a queen bed and 2 small bunk beds in the side hallway. So it's not a party center. This is not a house that can have 10, 20 people in there. They referred to residential laws and how the ability to remove people. I can assure you Majestic Oaks laws are more than any residential or commercial law there is, and we do use them. Upon any complaint, I ask the guest to leave with no refund. We do not allow unruliness in Majestic Oaks. A lot of concern is about the taxpayer and paying the taxes. We also pay taxes as Majestic Oaks and as me as a private owner of property in Ocean Springs and Biloxi and along the coast. It's also my concern to make sure that all these properties look nice. And I assure you, if you haven't been to Majestic Oaks, we take a lot of time and effort to keep the landscaping and our presence looking really nice. That's all I got. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Anybody else on my left, your right, wish to comment? Yes, sir, you may. Anybody, again, on my right, your left? Anybody in the back? All right, that concludes citizens' comments. We'll now move to the policy agenda. If the clerk will read the resolution 4A, please. Thank you.
Resolution to grant conditional use approval to authorize the establishment of short-term rentals within 3 separate unit sites within the Majestic Oaks RV property.
There's a motion by Ms. Newman.
Second.
There's a second by Mr. Glavin. Discussion. Ms. Newman?
Now, I could be wrong, but I do believe that Mr. Thomas did not intentionally break the law, just as if we had a Mardi Gras event in front of my business, and I would automatically assume that my liquor license extends right outside my door to put up a tent and sell liquor as well. So I don't think his intentions, especially having established a business already, is to break the law and jeopardize his business. I highly doubt that. And Marcus, this is a RV? It looks better than my house. Okay. Now, I do want to, you have contacted me about, it's been a while, well, you showed up at the coffee shop when I called you in his complaint about the dog park. And
Excuse me, Ms. Newman. Mr. Thomas, you may want to come up here if you're going to be asked questions. That way you can be picked up on the mic. Thank you. I'm
Yes,
sorry
you're
to interrupt
correct. You did contact me, and you had some complaints about the dog park, and I contacted you, Mr. Thomas.
Yes,
And I assume you took care of it because I hadn't heard any more complaints.
we did. We came to a resolution. Many years ago, the buzzword in the world is dog parks. I'm sure the city's put up a couple. And Majestic Oaks enclosed an area where there was a dog area where the dogs ran back and forth since before I bought the property. And we put a fence around it. And like most dog parks, nobody goes into it. There is an occasional person, one or two a day at best. We monitor it. And
I honestly, in my mind, it's the same thing, short-term rental, RV park. Now, if the residents feel more comfortable bringing these up front, that's fine. I would imagine, like you said, hearing them backing out would be more of a concern. But if they feel more comfortable with them being up front, in my mind, it's the same exact thing. And I probably would have assumed, like you had, that it would be the same exact thing. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Mr. Glavin?
Yeah. Majestic RV Park is very well known. You got a good reputation with any business that is operating in and around other businesses or residents. There's going to be a conflict sooner or later, and you try to work as good neighbors to resolve that. I hear the arguments back and forth on what's permissible, what's legal, what's illegal, what's whether you applied correctly. It sounds like you went through our director's office and when it was brought to your attention and try to make things right. This area, I'm familiar with this area as well, and the business that you're operating in there, and you got 3 of these duly tagged structures that seem like they may qualify under some guidelines, and I'm supporting, I'll support your request.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Barrett?
Just so I understand correct, on this map right here that y'all provided, this, Mr. Harmon, this is your home right here, is this? Okay, and the short-term rentals are right here in the middle,
they're actually all the way to the back, Nathan, right now,
up here?
at the top, yeah.
Excuse me just for a moment. If you're going to ask Mr. Harmon some questions, I may
Yeah, I was just
want him to be
asking
by a
him, making
microphone,
sure
is all.
that this is where you're located. So you're located basically on the northeast corner of the park? Okay, and so this dot here, Mr. No, I'm asking Mr. Doomer now. I was just making sure that I had the location of your home right. So what is this dot right here?
The dot is showing the center of the RV.
The center of the RP. Okay, where are these RVs located in this
Right
park?
now, they're on the way north.
Okay.
The application is to have them move all the way down furthest to Pass Road.
So these were going to be all the way against Pass Road?
Correct.
Okay.
Next to it, there's a lot in front of Majestic Oaks.
But on the south side of the
South
park?
side, yes.
Okay.
Councilman, if you look over here,
There's a wall.
it's about in this area right here. There's a big, beautiful lawn right here.
Yes.
And the proposed site 49, 50, 51, I believe are right here, right, Mr. Thomas?
On the other side.
This side?
No, it's to the left of the pool, Stephen.
Left,
Right, I'll get it.
here?
Right there.
Okay.
Yes.
So, all right, Councilman and Councilwoman right here is where the proposed
And approximately how far is that from Mr. Harmon's property?
1,750 feet.
Mr. Harmon, do you currently have any issues with the RVs that are coming in and out that border your property?
Would you hand the mic to Mr. Harmon, please? Thank you, Mr. Doomer.
I can't tell. The RVs that have parked in the back since the expansion that they've done have really not been that great a problem.
Okay.
Again, the pictures that I showed you that include those units that they want to use now are on the same level and not as appealing, as you can see just on the face of it. And we're concerned about, again, the noise that will permeate throughout the area.
All right, that's the only questions I have. And Mr. Creel, if this passes, our department, or your department will make sure that those units are where he says they're going to be, correct?
Yes, and also remember that as a conditional use,
We can pull this at any.
that's right, and if there are requests for additional short-term rentals in here, that would have to come back before the planning commission and the council too.
All right, that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Deming, I believe you had some questions.
I did. I've actually been writing an entire opinion here on my notes, but I don't think I need to go that deep into it after some of the questions and some of the comments from the other council members. One thing that I'm curious to know is how long have you been operating this prior to now?
We actually started in December. They came up on October, but it took us several months to figure out Airbnb, honestly. I mean, I think our first reservation was in December.
Okay.
And most of the reservation are weekend travelers, okay? So they're there just for 2 nights, seems to be the highest volume we're getting out of the units.
So one of the questions that leads me to is how many parties have occurred since then? And when I look at these reviews that Mr. Hingen passed us, nice place, very quiet, super cute, cozy, quiet, pleasant, clean. I mean, none of these seem like, wow, this is a bomb-ass place to throw down. You know, it's all very, very reserved. So how many parties have occurred?
I've had no parties. The only party at Majestic Oaks is Cruising the Coast, and they usually shut down at 10 o'clock.
Okay. Now, I know Mr. Harmon, he alluded to renting properties, and he has a policy that's, as he stated, you can't bother the neighbor policy. What is your policy for this type of behavior, and how do you handle it?
Sorry, but I can't really hear you.
Mr. Harmon, I referred to your statement regarding your policy, you can't bother the neighbor policy. I'm assuming you rent, tenant, or,
I have a landlord with
Give him
several
money.
rental properties. They're all residential properties. The language in the lease is not mine. It's legal language that comes with the lease. And it specifically states about the legal right to quiet enjoyment of your property. And so we do everything to follow that. In fact, I've never had anyone that I had to throw out as a result of it, okay? Because I am adamant about, I get to vet these people. I get to know who I'm putting in these units. You cannot say that about short-term rentals or what's going to show up. You can't.
well, that's
Just
not,
because it hasn't happened yet.
but that's not actually true, Mr. Harmon. So I use Airbnb and VRBO, and I have a rating. And so many unit owners can deny my renting to me based off my rating. And then I have to go in and I have to sign an agreement not to throw parties. We get vetted. We have to turn in licenses for everybody that's going to be in the unit. So there are a lot of precautionary measures taken by some of these organizations and renters. And so because of your policy, that just spurred the questions to Mr. Thomas about what his policy is. So Mr. Thomas, if you could explain to me your don't bother the neighbor policy and how you enforce it.
Again, the policy is the,
No, Mr. Thomas.
a policy. Oh, I'm sorry.
So our policy is, you just said it, Airbnb vets most of the people who use that cabin. Our policy as far as individual units, I have a 10-year or older policy of RVs that we have to look at pictures if it's older to keep our standards of units higher. And obviously with the people who are traveling into Majestic Oaks, do not want any noise. Like you said, it's a very quiet place, and it always stays very quiet. A lot of our guests will repeat, but we don't do a rent-safe background. You know, we actually are based on the unit style.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. I appreciate that. Now, this request to amend your application and move the units to the inside of the park, nor the southern end near Pass Road? Is that something that you guys are amenable to? I mean, is that-
We are.
Okay, I think that the majority of the other stuff, moving the units inside, closer to the south, vitiates most of the complaints, I think, that are brought up. Now, some of these names and addresses I see on both petitions are the same. So out of curiosity, I would love to hear from anybody else that has an opposition and what the opposition is, if they're directly related to what's the word that I'm using for, tangentially connected to the property. Is there anybody that's actually connected to the property that is in opposition to this?
May I say
Other than
something?
Mr. Harmon?
May I say something? Mr. Harmon's property is the only residential property that butts Majestic Oaks. Past Mr. Harmon's property to the west, northwest is the Keesler Air Force Base. Directly adjacent to us is a storage unit, and then you have a car, well, it just got knocked down. It was a car wash. It's about to be a donut shop. You go to the retirement home, which is Century Oaks, and then you move to Splash Car Wash, the Jamaican restaurant, the hair salon, and then to the west of our property is a 50-foot road that starts I can't remember the name of the subdivision that's next to it.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I think you're right. This is almost distinguishable only by ownership of the unit versus short-term and daily rentals. I also disagree with Mr. Hinchin that it creates spot zoning. This is actually conditional use. That's what conditional use is for. And like Mr. Doomer has alluded to, if this does induce more applications, we'd be happy to address them here just like we are today. I have nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Tisdale.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Any questions?
Yeah, y'all keep saying it's really quiet, the great neighborhood. That's because you had no short-term rentals in it. You don't know what's going to happen when you have short-term rentals. You can't say it, I can't say it. You can say, how you going to protect everybody in the neighborhood? You can't. You never know what you're going to get on the weekends or whenever they come in. That's what short-term rentals does. And those people party, cut up whatever they want to do, and they leave. So you can't control that, neither can the city. My question to a couple things is a conditional use. Why so many moves to make this work for short-term rental? We're not accomplishing anything for the city of Biloxi again. They got the houses in the back, they build them in the back for a reason. The back of the property is how far from the residential neighborhood, not the 1,700 feet in the front. That's easy to say that. How far is the back part of the property to the neighborhood behind you? 100 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet?
Where they're sitting now, it's
No, no, I'm talking about your property line. You're dealing with a piece of property that you're getting ready to turn in the short-term rental. So the back part of the property is going to be affected just as much as the front. As well, because you will not stop at 3 cottages. You're doing it to make money, which that's what you do for a living. They had no problem. You said you've been in for 9 years? You've been where for 9 years?
Majestic Oaks.
At Majestic Oaks. And you had no clue that this was not set up for short-term rental in 9 years.
No, I did not.
You know, y'all keep saying the violations, we shouldn't be penalizing you for violation. Well, it's kind of hard when somebody does something wrong to do anything for them. You know, whatever the reason, you didn't know, you want to assume, whatever you want to say it is, that's all part of it. The other problem I have is when you turn this into short-term rentals, and everybody that's living there now start doing the same thing, y'all know you lose your homestead right exemption. That's the first thing you lose. Then it becomes small businesses, different tax base. Then we have to worry about the fire department. How is the fire department going to handle that? The insurance. All these things affects once you start changing all these properties into short-term rentals. You're not stopping at them 3 cottages. Everybody in the world knows that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I've seen it too many times with these apartments. We're only going to do 3. Well, it don't happen. You need to look at the city, and the council needs to look at the deeper problem. Here's another bunch of residents we're going to lose again. So how many residents they have there living in the city of Biloxi that are residents? You go to short-term rentals, and they either leave it, you're gonna lose another group of citizens. That's why the population keeps telling y'all the city of Biloxi is not changing. It's not going up because we had 348 short-term rentals, 2.5 times that, the normal family. That's 762 people we lost in the city of Biloxi. You're getting ready to lose some more. The 3 cottages is not a problem because nobody lives there. Nobody's living there, but the rest of the people that live in Majestic Oak do live there, and that is their home. Could be residential, whatever you want to call it, that's their home. That's where they live. And like the Charles said, that's their home. They want peace and quiet. They want people to take care of and respect their property. Fine and damn, them little cottages that y'all want to move around, which I think is crazy. They can't have that many moves to do a short-term rental. That's just me. You put them in the wrong place, man, that was your fault. Now you want to move in the front, whatever. Move on the side, move over here. I don't know where you want to put them at. But I mean, that's not a good thing for me to look at something like that, to make this much problem to have anything turn into a short-term rental. Let me see here. Right now, you're looking at just doing 3 cottages. The people that live in the front part of the residents that live in the front part, how's it going to affect them with them cottages and parties in front of those homes that live there right now, or that trailers, whatever it is? Because it was always a great park, and it did a great job when they opened it up, and everybody that lived there loved it. But now you're getting ready to change what was a great piece of property to me. So I mean, the people in the front row, the closest to those cottages, what is their opinion?
So in Majestic Oaks, the guests that are coming in and out, is that what you're?
No, the people actually living there right now. The front row of houses, the trailers that's living there right now, where you're getting ready to put 3 short-term rentals in front of them.
So the guests in Majestic Oaks and even the snowbirds and the cruising the coast guests are actually excited about these cottages and have had no negative feedback, or they would come here, I'm sure, or send a letter in. Our guests, in fact, the snowbirds that are maturing in life have asked to use those park model RVs for the wintertime since they can't travel here via their RV or bus any longer. So they're actually enthused about it. And in the United States, I mean, these park model RVs, tents and cabins and all these different things are really changing the footscape of all RV resorts. So our guests are excited about it. And we've never had any complaints about it, oddly enough.
You hadn't any complaints because you hadn't had it yet. You don't know what kind of complaints you're going to get. You don't know that. I don't know that.
So we've been doing daily rentals since we've opened. And so we have daily guests that come through daily. They're just using our RV. It's almost the same business model, except they're bringing theirs in, and it's lowering the headlights, the people moving in, the conversations of people backing in, and the confrontations between husband and wives, which I've seen. It caused more noise than probably anybody checking into one of these cottages will. It's very seamlessly. They actually book on Airbnb. 9 times out of 10, we visit with the people, but they're out into the community. That's something I do, is I partner with at least 10 local businesses to send people to the community, because Majestic Oaks does not have the amenities of some of the bigger resorts. And that's our big attraction, is pushing people into the community. So they're not on our property per se, having these parties or perceived parties, which we've never had a party before, to my knowledge, that's gotten out of control or gotten loud. We're pretty self-contained there with our management style, and they know we will ask them to leave.
Do you have a 24-hour manager?
I do not. We usually leave on the weekends at 7, but we have a lot of our guests who come in the RV industry and campers. They don't want noise next to them. They do not want trouble. I have a 24-hour phone. Plus, a lot of them have my personal cell phone. And I will drive over there at 11 o'clock at night, which I have many times, if there's any problem, tell somebody to cut the radio off or put your campfire out, whatever has to be done. So we do monitor the business 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Nobody wants any trouble. It happens anyway when you change that many people.
That's right. And
Think about when you have a neighbor that stay there so long, then you're used to them. Like he said, you're used to what they do and the type of person they are. When you change, say every weekend, you will, I don't care where you are, you wind up in trouble. I mean, that's just, the average is gonna happen.
And we work with the neighbors around us. We love to work with Mr. Harmon. We do a lot of, especially the storage units, several residents watching for theft and other homeless issues that go around the property there. They will call me. There's 4 or 5 of them that have my cell phone and have called me, a couple times over the years and said, asked me what was going on or did you see this happening? And so I decided to put together a community involvement to protect Majestic Oaks and my neighbors also. And they know that. That's probably why 118 of them signed that, because I've been over in their neighborhoods talking to them.
Yeah, we have neighborhood watch.
Neighborhood watch, right.
And you can't eliminate the problem, you just try to control it.
You try to control
And
it.
ask the fire chief, what kind of problem we have when we start changing these RV parks into short-term rentals? Get Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Get to a microphone. Thank you, sir.
So you don't see, there's no problem at all?
No, sir. Not to emergency call.
And what effects does this have on, not you, what effects on insurance?
On our insurance or?
Insurance for the people living there. And your insurance also, because now you're going to turn yourself into a business, different type business.
It's still business as usual. The RVs are covered by their individual policies that come and visit us on a daily visit. Our insurance pretty much stayed the same. We just added, some more to cover the structures. It doesn't change anything they do because it's still an RV that's sitting there. We're not going to allow individuals to rent out their own RVs. That's not, I'm in property management also, that's not going to happen at Majestic Oaks. I think you asked that earlier. It's not an individual business for them to rent out their space. That's not going to happen at all. And I do have people scanning Airbnb because we shop rates, like everybody that, that's in a rental business to see what rates are going. So I can assure you that's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, it's, we get it all the time up here.
Yeah, I know you do. I can imagine. I know you hear it a lot in.
We see all the glossary pages, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention to all that. If it was such a great idea, then you wouldn't have these people being opposed to it. That's the problem. You have to look at it. You have to respect the neighbors as a city council. You have to respect them because they've been there, been taking care of everything for how many years they've been there. So you have to always respect the neighbors.
I agree.
I had one question y'all kept throwing at this. This $1 million y'all paid in taxes, what you paid $1 million on?
I think that's a cumulative of sales tax that we generate. We see about 46,000 people, 17,000 units come through Majestic Oaks in a year. And that's a cumulative of over the average. And these numbers come from the leisure group study and the RV studies that says that an RV, per RV, spends $252 a day in the community. Since Majestic Oaks doesn't have water slides and other thing I can charge for, most of our guests use it as a stopping point. We have a high population of nightlies that are passing through, and their main reason is to come here. Number one, obviously, is easy to figure out, is the casinos, especially during the snowbird season. It's like a mailroom of propaganda for free stuff. So we know that the gaming numbers are up. But secondly is art, and to enjoy everything I'll use it, the Secret Coast has to offer is what they're here for. But casinos are definitely number one. Not saying we're better than anybody else, but we've strived to be the best. When it was built by Sammy, he poured it all concrete, heavily landscaped, and we've maintained that integrity for the property. And all we've done is increase it. If I don't brag or anything in that nature, but we do win a lot of awards, at least one a year. Last year, Reader's Digest voted us number one in the state of Mississippi. I don't pay for this. I didn't even know Reader's Digest was even still around. So we are out actively working in the state of Mississippi at the state level to increase the RV stops here. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort to promote Majestic Oaks and other RV resorts.
Well, that's great. And y'all been that way because it's been a great unit,
Yeah.
a great piece of property. And what you're trying to do is change it. And I don't know how it's going to help you or not. Really don't know that part. As it's been a great piece of property, and the people living there loved it, so I don't know why you would change it anyway. You're doing quite well as it was. Other than make more money. That's the only reason you would do anything like that, so. That's my problem I have with it. Why change a good thing? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Guines?
I think Nathan and Robert pretty much answered a lot of my questions. And then I had a question for Mr. Creel, but for the sake of the time, I was reading through it. The Planning Commission voted 10-1 to recommend approval for the conditional use. So pretty much got all my questions answered, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Creel, if you'll, I have a question. And I'm not sure is why I'm asking you. I'm thinking most short-term rentals will pay the 7% tax, but also pay an additional 5%. Does that have to be in a particular area or district, or no, is that every short-term rental?
No, that's every short-term rental.
And that goes towards, I think, to pay the Coliseum's
That's
debt
correct.
and operating expenses or whatever. So, and what we've discovered, I think, because we've been dealing with this topic for years, I think we've discovered that whoever's checking the boxes or whatever on VRBO or Airbnb or somebody, you've got to flip through there and you've got to check those appropriate boxes, and that box is not always checked. So that's just one thing I wanted to clarify. All short-term rentals should be paying 12% in taxes.
That's correct. And again, we notify the hotel, motel, the tourism about any that we add. So if these are approved, they will be notified because they monitor the taxes as well.
Okay, and the annual fire inspections occur, they're scheduled and occur once something is approved for as a short-term rental in the city.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And I'm thinking there are some ordinances associated with short-term rentals, the signage, advertising that, the parking and everything. Does that, based on your experience, does that come into play? Is that an issue here?
The parking is not. These are small units, so they should have at least, the 2 parking spaces for the units there. Also signage, just about all of the advertising is done online, and there's very, very little, if any, on-site advertising about short-term rental.
Okay, and we learned from the Department of Revenue, I guess a year ago when they were down and we were talking about these kind of things, that short-term rentals can be charged a commercial water rate.
That's correct.
That's
yes, sir.
correct. So my question is I don't know how your water lines are set up in an RV park. I don't suppose they're individually metered, but and I don't think the city does anything about charging short-term rentals a commercial water rate at this point. I don't know if they do or not, but if we did in the future, would these individual units need to have their own water meters? Or
If we pursue that, it's a little difficult with a park like this because as many units as they have in there, they have 1 meter.
Right.
And that's the way the city ordinance was written at our request, is that they would just have 1 meter. But I'd get with Billy Ray about that and see how we would work out.
Right, and I'm mentioning these things just because I know some folks are going to be following this. It's in a number of issues that people don't think about, but.
Yes, sir.
And you said you first started booking online reservations for these units in December?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I noticed in the transcript that you also have short-term rentals in Ocean Springs.
I do.
And my guess is their process is a little different as cities do. Probably basically the same, but it varies a little.
It's considerably different. You have to apply for the address, and you go through this process, and then if you're approved through that process, they send out 100 letters to your neighbors. Most of Ocean Springs is in the residential neighborhoods. And at that time, the neighbors have to respond back. If there's opposition, then they go through the same process here. But at that point, that's how it's notified.
And the number of short-term rentals in Ocean Springs, as I recall, is limited?
It's limited right now. They're battling the same thing. I think every city is, that there's a lot. They're limited to 35. They wanted to do a trial run, and I haven't followed it, in a long time, but I think they might have expanded. I've been in a couple council meetings.
And are there, or how many other, I'll call them fixed structures like these cottages? I don't know what they're called. I'm not in the RV business, but you are. How many other structures are similar that could be applied for and approved as a short-term rental? You'd mentioned these two little units and then an RV.
And an actual Class A RV.
Right. Are there any other units like that?
We do not own any other units.
All right. During the Planning Commission hearing, I was there and listened to everything, and also looking through the transcript. The question was asked, are there plans in the future for more short-term rental requests? And you or somebody who spoke for you was very non-committal on that. It's like, well, we don't know. And I'm thinking, if it's a good thing, well, yeah. But what are your immediate plans?
We do not have any immediate plans for this property. We actually have another parcel of land that we would possibly put there, but that's further down the line.
Okay. No immediate plans?
No immediate.
Long-term plans?
The price doubled on these due to material costs. They're no longer feasible. So at that aspect, long-term, not at Majestic Oaks.
Okay. I guess one other concern I have is, to me, there are parallels between individual apartment units being approved as short-term rentals and the remainder of the complex. I feel like once we open that door, that at some point people are going to come back, apartment complex owners are going to come back and say, this is pretty lucrative. I want to flip some more apartments to short-term rentals. We currently have that in a couple of apartment complexes right now. I sort of see this as very similar. If it's a good deal and very lucrative, as Mr. Lawrence alluded to, then we would expect to see maybe some more RV parks and pads where some sort of structure could be located and then applied for a permit or a conditional use. It'd be tough to deny anybody once we open this Pandora's box. I just want to make that comment. I also want to note that we dealt with an issue in Ward 7, and I guess the point was made because I asked about other residential areas where properties owners might request a commercial zoning and then ask for a conditional use. And I recall that the comments were, well, the density is such that wouldn't happen in, I think I'd mentioned the sun-kissed area as an example. And to me, this is kind of similar. How many units do you reckon, how big is that property? You know how many acres it is, Majestic Oaks?
Our property is 7 acres, but only 5 of it's developed. The front lawn is 1.5 acres, 2 acres roughly, that's all oak trees and grass.
So how many units do you have on 5 acres?
102.
102 on, so that's 20 units an acre.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know typically how large a residential site is, but this seems to be pretty dense. And by the way, it's always been, because I've driven by there a lot on Pass Road, it's always been an attractive RV park.
Thank you.
that being said, I'm most concerned because I have other RV parks in my ward. There's one by the Snyder Center, there's one on the beach, there in Ward 5, and I'm thinking there's a small RV park that exists right off the Bees Road on Mission Lane. There are like 3 or 4, it's a mobile home park. They're different than RVs, I think, for zoning purposes. But again, it's like the apartments, and we allow a few to flip, and pretty soon, if it's lucrative, you want to flip the rest of those units. I'll just leave it at that. All right, any other comments? Mr. Glavin?
One, I hate belaboring it, but you run in an RV park. What is an RV park? It's a transient-driven business. You rent by the day, you rent by the week, and then you rent by the month. And it changes with the seasons, of course. You mentioned the snowbirds that come down when it gets cold up north, but during the season, it's all weekly and daily rentals normally, unless you have some long-terms that are in there. But you're transient-driven, and then you want to put these couple of cottages or whatever they are within this facility to diversify a little bit, and it seems like it fits and makes sense for this business that you're running. The guests that are going to be in these cottages, look, I'm in the hotel business. I can't control who comes in and pays me to stay in a room. Are they going to be partying down or not? They are. I'm going to, kind of take care of it with security or Biloxi's finest or whatever we need to do. But this is you got a great reputation. You're trying to diversify a little bit to attract more transient. This isn't long-term rentals that you're putting in here. I don't view it much differently than the transient business. We're all short-term rentals. All the hotels up and down the beach are short-term rentals. We're renting, average is 2.2 days that we rent those rooms for, the average. So I applaud you for your entrepreneurship, and yes, we look at these on a case-by-case basis. Your case is before us today. To me, it makes perfect sense. That concludes my comments.
All right, any other comments?
Just one,
Mr. Deming?
Just one final thought, kind of in line with what Mr. Glavin was saying. In fear of being challenged for being arbitrary and capricious, I think this is a unique situation in the fact that you guys are amenable to the amendment. You're moving it closer to the street and the businesses. It's got its own natural barrier in between the other RVs because you're moving it into the inside, so it has a barrier. You don't have a history and tradition of these partying problems. You haven't had any issues after 10 months of activity yet. It fits within your business model. I don't think that this is anywhere near being arbitrary and capricious. I think you guys have a good plan here. And if we do get other RV parks that come in, and if they have the same plan where the units are on the inside and have a barrier from the residences, a barrier from the businesses, a barrier from the people, as you guys do, it fits within their model, they have a history of no problems in maintaining their properties, then we'll consider them. I think you guys have a good model. Thank you for being amenable to the Planning Commission's amendments and considering the majority of the constituents around you. Nothing further.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Lawrence, you
Say
have
about something, all making comments. I like to one time for us to stand up to help the people that oppose it. We never seem to do that. So I'm going to support the people that oppose it. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Before we call for the question, I just want to point out that the resolution designates 3 particular units, which was in the application as I recall. That's numbers 48, 49, and 50. And those would be at the north end of the property. Is that accurate?
The south end.
That would be at the south end, which is what the Planning Commission recommended. So that would be closer to the Pass Road end and farther from Buchanan
That's correct, yes.
Avenue. Okay. So that's the resolution that's presented. Unless somebody has an amendment, that's the resolution we'll vote on. All in favor of the resolution as presented? That's 5 in favor, all opposed? All right, so it's approved on a 5-2 vote. And those are for units 48, 49, and 50.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
That brings us to item 5B. If the clerk would read that resolution, please.
Resolution determining and allocating certain distribution of funds pursuant to the Biloxi Code of Ordinance, Section 12-9-9, for the fiscal year 2021 and 2022.
All right,
I'll move it.
I'm sorry, it is item 4B, thank you. All right, there's a motion by Mr. Lawrence, is there a second? I'll second it.
You can break this down, Peter, what we're doing here? This is just distributing the money that we collect from the gaming?
Right, last year, about this time last year, the council has that appropriation authority to determine where the school money goes. There was an old court order that used to provide how it was allocated. That court order expired some years ago. Last year we did that, and this is to go ahead and reappropriate according to, everything is basically according to that prior court order, except we're pulling off $50,000 for technology uses for Biloxi High. But everything else is the same.
The 50,000 is for what? Technology for
It's
what?
it's for use by Biloxi High to focus on vocational and technical type training.
So you're designating 50,000 for a certain program for them? For Biloxi, okay.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I have no comments. All right, we'll call for the question. All in favor? All right, all opposed, that's a 6-0 vote.
This is all, Jason, come.
That brings us to item 4C. If the clerk would read that resolution, please.
Resolution of the mayor and city council authorizing and improving engagement of professionals for the insurance of the city of Biloxi, Mississippi, tax increment financing limited obligation refund and bond, authorizing and improving the execution of a private placement agreement for the bonds, ratifying the execution of a committal letter for the bonds, and for other related purposes.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Glavin. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Barrett. Discussion, Mr. Glavin.
Again, this is just some of those procedures we have to do to kind of get these bonds issued and refinanced and all that kind of stuff. You have anything else, Mike, you want to add, or Jane? Nope. Or
If we could get Ms. Minardi a microphone, she's worth listening to.
When we came before you at the end of July, you gave authority to the mayor and the administration to negotiate a deal to sell those bonds within certain parameters, and I can't remember if the outside interest rate was 2 or 3%, but the commitment letter you have in front of you is with People's Bank. It's at 1.47%, and it meets all of those parameters. So it's been signed. We're just asking you to ratify it. And then we're asking you to approve the hiring of your professionals, which are me and Mr. Abide as issuer's counsel and Raymond James as placement agent.
The last step in the refi kind of situation.
Yes, well, that and the validation, but we're working on that too.
Thank you, Ms. Minardi. Mr. Glavin, anything else?
no, that's it.
All right, Mr. Barrett, any other questions or comments by the council? We'll call for the question. All in favor? None opposed. That's a 7-0 vote for the clerk. That brings us to item D. If the clerk would read the resolution, please.
Resolution to amend Resolution Number 440-15 to amend the terms and conditions of the Economic Development Security Fund to designate it henceforth as a restricted fund within the general fund and for other related purposes.
I'll move it.
Is there a motion?
Restricted.
Mr. Lawrence, is there a second? Mr. Barrett? All
A
right.
couple questions, Peter. Mike, this is economic development money, the 4.1 we started with originally.
Yeah, it was.
And why are we putting it back at this time?
We're not putting it back. Let me explain. Back when we settled that money, we used 2-point-something million. Fund balance was always 4.4 million. Jason is here, kind of prepared to do this. We restricted that, put a fence around it. We restricted it, nobody else. It was not a restriction of anyone else. The whole purpose of this is to fairly be included, this fund balance, as the financial community looks at it, is unrestricted as far as anybody else. We've kind of designated it. That fund balance, which is about 4.2 million, is based in cash and the debt service that we borrowed money from to pay off those debts. But that fund balance is important in computation of our reserves. So instead of just only the general fund balance, and then it will include the 4 million or so in the economic development, the 13 fund, as I call it. Jason, is that pretty much a fair statement?
So it'd be listed, instead of being restricted, to be unrestricted.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's unrestricted. It's only restricted by us. It's not
And what happened
else.
from the language of the original resolution, it said it was restricted for economic development, but the council would look at the project and always decide whether or not to spend the money. But on our CAFRAs, on our year-end audits, they had put in there restricted for economic development. So it was not fairly reflected as part of our general fund.
Right.
And I know at the end of every budget year, Councilman, you kind of always had an issue with that, saying this should be part of our general fund and be part of our overall reserve. So this is basically what we're doing. It's still going to be used for economic development and still keep the same flavor, but on our CAFRA and on our audit reports, it won't say restricted. It'll be, and it'll help our bond rating, it'll help our overall financial state. That's what they look at.
My concern from the beginning was taking the money from the debt service. I always thought
Well, yeah,
that was a
created
tough thing to do, you know.
Well, we knocked down about 5 or 6% to, borrowed 2.2 million to flush those things out, and eventually it will be paid down and paid off. But basically, not the cash or the receivable. The part of that fund balance is important to the financial community. Jason, give me an amen every once in a while here. But really, it's important in computation of the reserve. That fund balance, it puts our number for reserve, as well as fund balance and general fund, as well as this 4 million. It should be, without question, part of our reserve computation.
Yes, sir. It has a major effect on the bond rating y'all receive. If you issue any new money bonds, they will look at this. They will look at this if they review a rating on the bonds that you have outstanding. Just the availability of unrestricted funds to be used for general governmental purposes is something that the bond community puts a lot of weight on. And this will help your overall ratio of liquidity and fund balance that they look at.
Jason, what's your last name, please, for the clerk?
Jason Thomas.
Jason Thomas.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Lawrence?
Thank you.
Mr. Barrett? Okay, Mr. Barrett, do you have a question?
No, I had actually called Peter earlier today about this, and he explained it to me, so I'm good.
All right, any other questions or comments?
I do.
Mr. Demon?
One concern is moving it to the unrestricted fund, right? Where it's at right now gives us a lot more oversight. Where it's at gives us a lot more.
No change in how you use that money, no change in how you would approve anything.
So what I'm asking is, are we going to make sure that this 4.1, even though we move it to an unrestricted account, will it have its own line item? Will we be able to monitor it indistinguishably from any of the other general funds?
Yeah, it's still in its own, part of the depository and track as a depository. There's no difference. It's just for computation, and not so much the cash, but the fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments? All right, we'll call for the question. All in favor of the resolution as presented? None opposed. That's a 7-0 vote for the clerk. That brings us to item E, if the clerk would read the resolution.
Resolution of notice of intent to amend section 9-1-22A of the Code of Ordinances pertaining to garbage collection and disposal fees.
So moved.
There's a motion by Mr. Lawrence. Is
I'll
there a
second.
second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Guines. All right. Mr. Lawrence.
A couple of questions. I know we changed it to 510. Y'all have it in there. It goes from 510 to 1510 to 1569. Now you're going to 1575. Right? So we're adding 6 cents per month.
Over the top of our cost, yeah.
And that's just.
We're not collecting garbage from a lot, because it's still over 100 people.
But basically, that was, that was a practice that you have a little bit of on top of our actual cost, which has gone up based on, waste management and those contracts with HCUA. So, I think 1569 to 1575.
The pass-through was 1502, we changed it
1510.
Right.
This year it's 1569, we changed to 1575.
Okay.
That extra 6 cents helps with our.
They're just actually covering the cost of the administration part of it.
Collecting up hands for people.
Yeah. And how many was 14,000 we charged for that?
14,230 something.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're up about 200 hands from a year.
Okay. Mr. Guines, questions or comments?
So are we talking about 59 cents a person, right? A household?
$5.75 per month per house per can.
Went up 65 cents.
Gotcha. Because we just want to make sure, because of the troubles we had, that we don't pay a little bit more and have less service. Everybody want to at least stay with the service, or even maybe look at going back to a second service, which I know would probably cost more.
What's
But
driving the increases in both of the contracts the county has, which is
Escalates them.
the waste management contract, garbage, Pelican waste contract, both have CPI allocation.
gotcha.
Built into it.
Gotcha.
And please note that what you're voting on is a resolution of notice of intent. You're going to get
Gotcha.
before. Did Peter steal my thing again? You
Two
get
more bites of the apple.
So that before it's final.
Okay, cool. That concludes.
This gives us a chance to put this in the newspaper.
Gotcha.
So that citizens.
Let me add also at the time, we did some things with Utility Authority where that 50 cents, that additional 65 cents was offset by a reduction in waste, our garbage debt fee. So if you use 2,000 gallons of water, we reduced it, you reduced that burden rate about 50 cents per 1,000 gallons. So you kind of, that has already been taken care of as far as the long-term play, because we implemented that to up to, I think, 25,000 gallons. So you get 50 cents per 1,000 gallons against your wastewater computation.
Trash is going up, water's going down.
That concludes my comments.
Any other comments or questions?
I guess the only question I have is the 6 cents that's being added on top of this, we already have that added in on our current rate.
Right.
We're basically just,
Stepping.
we're basically just increasing the cost of what's coming to us to break even. So we're not adding an additional 6 cents. That's already in place, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all in question.
On this consumer price index, do you know,
Consumer price index.
right, that's a percentage and it goes, so it went up this year, it will go up again next year?
Yeah, for the 5 year.
One would guess.
Well, I think we have one more year with waste management.
All right, and is there any increase at the, I guess, where they dump all this garbage? Don't we, in the cost of that or the weight of that garbage calculated as well for some sort of fee in that contract, or no? Am I?
The way they get to the cost of the actual disposal is, the formula they use is they look at the percentage of the number of cans in each city, in our case 14,000 some odd, and what percentage of that, of all the cans, and they assume you get that much percent of the garbage weight. So, I mean, that's the science. That's the science. So we're getting essentially 25% of the total garbage that disposal costs. I mean, there's no way to monitor
Right.
or meter the disposal of the trash.
And you mentioned that we're not capturing all the residents yet on garbage or garbage costs. I think you said earlier there were about 100. We're trying to track them down and all that other good
Yeah,
stuff.
this is probably the year where we're going to go to the next level and send letters out telling people if they don't pay the garbage bill, that we're going to put it on their taxes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Excuse me, what you're doing here just added 65 cents to the garbage collection fee. From 15.10 to 65, yeah, and 65 cents
15.10
per
to
person
75
per month for the collection of the
Per
garbage.
can, from,
So then, and this is just the intent,
this is notice of intent so that we can run it in the newspaper.
right? And then if the council approves that, the next time we
And there'll be
vote on
a
it.
first and second reading that you'll have to do. And the second reading takes place in September, the meeting in September, second meeting in September, I think.
Right now, so if it's approved, then my garbage fee is going up 60.
October the 1st.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All in favor of the resolution as presented? Okay, that's a 6-0 vote. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda.
I move it.
There's a motion by Mr. Lawrence, a second by Mr. Gaines. All right, we're up for discussion. Let me start with Mr. Glavin. Any items, Mr. Glavin?
I don't have any, no.
None. Mr. Barrett?
Okay, I just have a question. Can you explain, just because I'm nosy, what digital forensic equipment is or what it does? Just it piqued my interest.
Hand that man a mic, thank you. For those at home who don't recognize this gentleman, this is Chief Miller. He's a police chief. We never see him in his civvies. Thank you, Chief.
He's undercover.
So it allows us to enter computers and cell phones and extract the information.
Okay, that's all. It just piqued my interest. No.
You want to offer yours up?
Yeah, I'll give you mine right after. We'll see if it works. We'll give you Kenny's.
Anything else, Mr. Barrett?
Yes. W, Mr. Leonard.
W.
So, this is the Wool Market Drainage Project, the Road East project. So we're basically given a certificate of substantial completion.
For that project.
Related to that, I know that we have pulled some information on easements on the east side of Shriners.
We did, in fact, and I got the legal descriptions of those today. And I was going to suggest to the mayor that he made a call to one of those, probably the most vocal of those three parcel owners is the Marver gentleman, and maybe ask him to get the other two together and we'll put them in the same room and see if they'll just give us an easement.
Yeah, I know that he's already said that he will, just in fear of his business, because we got the other side pretty
And then we'll
much
get in there and
care
clean it
of.
out.
So if we can get in there and take care of that side, that's the only question I had on that.
Well,
just
she'll
where we
reach out
are.
to them this week.
But closing this won't affect that, correct?
Right.
Okay. And then, I, and MM go together, correct? MM is an addition, and double I.
Double I is the grant, this is just changing up the grant agreement. One of the things about the Sanger is that we put in a Gulf Coast Restoration Fund application for 3 different projects, one of which was another $1 million to do the inside of the Sanger. One of the things that they wanted us to clean up is we said them there was going to be no additional match. And they recorded it as 0 match. And we immediately saw the optics of that were not good. So we're working with them to redo that to show that actually we're overmatched, and we've actually contributed over $3 million, and they've only given us 2.
It's no additional city money.
No additional city money.
Those two go in together. The MM, okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, any questions?
Yeah, and on J, how much increase is it?
Is that J as in
Ju-
Juliet?
Juliet,
Juliet?
yeah, Juliet.
Okay.
Big J. The $65 to $160 per hour, how much increase is that for the city? Actually increase per hour.
Billy Ray, what's the cost of doubling the sweeper contract up?
I think the rate, I think this is just, I recall the rate being the same as last year. I may be wrong. Has it increased, has the rate increased any, Billy Ray?
No, not that I know of. We try to keep it where we've been keeping it for the last few years.
So you say it's the same?
Same rate, just more work.
Yeah.
But this is a workshop issue, but I think the council talked to us about doubling up on that contract so that we could sweep more often.
That was always the biggest problem. We were trying to figure out, we actually had 2 of them. They was running somewhere, we just couldn't figure out when it was running at. Right, Dixon? We didn't see a lot of them. So we'd like to at least see a lot of them get something cleaned. A lot of these streets need a lot of cleaning, that's for sure. But I was just wondering if there's an increase in the price, or they're just gonna provide more services.
Oh, what I'm gonna actually have to do is to have a meeting with them to see if I can increase
That mic's not working.
the sweepage time. Oh, it was.
That is.
But what I want to do is try to sit down with them and so I can work out something where I can have possibly more than one sweeper sweeping the entire town. And so I'm going to have to talk to them and see what we got to do that before I can get some kind of agreement rolling. Because I think some of y'all has asked if we could get more than one sweeper, some of the other councilmen.
Right? Just checking that. It's something we definitely need to get done, without a doubt, you know. On BB, what is the BB, Mike? A double bead, what we got here for that one? That's supposed to be Bravo, Bravo twice, or how you do that? BB,
BB,
yeah.
Bravo, Bravo.
Okay, I was just wondering if we just use that word. What are we doing? Who is calculating this here?
BB is the arbitrage group.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a group, but one of the things we have to do with our bonds is that once a year we have to have them audited to show that we have not exceeded the maximum amount of interest that we made on the bond. Because if we do, then we have to owe some money back. So this is just a very small fee that we pay to these very unique, small consulting company that does that for us. And they sent us back an audit showing up to now, in the 2 years I've been doing this with these guys, they've looked at all our bonds and none of them, we made enough money on it to get us in any trouble.
Pretty much verifying that we're doing everything the right way.
You can go borrow at 2% and get 5%.
That's good, not a bad thing. And Peter, on all these tri-party agreements, he'd sleep, he gotta wake him up. There he is. There's a whole bunch of them, so are these all new ones? Like DDE?
No, DD is extending something like 2 weeks, and I think EE was extending it like 3 days. She got her certificate last week, and we just needed to extend it a week to keep everything in compliance. Those are not new. Neither of
All
those
right,
are.
that, there's really no change in money?
No, sir.
It's all time?
Yeah, DD, EE, and GG are just allowing probably 30 days between all three of them, and then they're in compliance. They just got their certificates.
Okay, and the HH was the same, did you say HH?
HH as well, that's right.
Okay.
GG and HH are together. GG just acknowledges she got her certificate, and HH is authorizing the appropriation. So these have already been pre-approved, but they're just acknowledging that they've now complied with all aspects of the grant.
On this, I know Nathan asked a question. How much money have we put into the Sanger so far?
What's the answer? What's the question?
How much money totally? I know we've been getting a lot of grants and a lot of money's been coming in. Has the city actually itself put out any money? The city?
The total project budget is $5.1 million. Total cost are 3.7. We've got money that's encumbered in existing contracts. The total unencumbered funds, the money we have not committed or spent yet, is $1,088,000. We have $1,088,000
To spend.
to spend. Now, you know what hasn't been subtracted from that is the resolution that's on tonight.
Finished.
The one to finish the exterior on the west side. That resolution that's on today's consent agenda.
That's another $450,000 roughly.
Right. That's item
MM.
5MM, Mike. Dixie. So what I'm telling you is, when you vote tonight, $1 million turns into $500,000.
Right. I guess we'll somehow or another recoup this money when we start renting this place out for millions of dollars or what?
Recoup.
No, just wondering where we're going with that, you know? That's $5 million. Phew. One building, that's pretty tough. Anyway, the last one is LL on the fire department. I thought we already had that into the contract to pay for the fire stations and all that.
LL.
I thought we had already approved that. You're amending the budget for what reason?
Which one are we talking about?
So this is we're paying for remember the 2 fire trucks you bought last year?
Right.
All right, this is the next payment.
That's all it is?
That's all it is. It's a lease payment. We lease them over 7 years. This is the second of seven payments.
So it's set up to pay them, we just pay
It's for the 2.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Lawrence?
That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, anything? Mr. Guines, anything?
Yeah, just wanted to reinforce Clarence Taylor with the Housing Authority, been doing an excellent job. Highly recommend it for reemployment. Thank you.
No, I have nothing to ask.
All right, thank you. On item double A, Alpha. Anyway, this is the Lighthouse Pier. Lord knows we saw enough letters to the editor and sounds off and everything, but what we're doing here is an agreement with for engineering services to look at reconstructing that rehabilitating that pier, but to be clear, and my understanding is it's not going to be the pier that's been replaced
That's
year
right.
after
It's
year.
with
This is going to be
mitigation
a
to
new
make it-
improved pier.
Make it where we don't have to do this again.
Seymour Engineering's in the house if you'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Only if he's a racehorse. We want a racehorse.
So a quick horse.
Just, Mark, if you would, just in 25 words or less, what's going to be different about this pier?
Yes, sir. Right now, all ideas are on the table. When we put in for the RFQ, we actually had a think tank with all my engineers, and we're coming up with all kinds of structural methods to make this thing more sustainable, so we're not back here doing it again after the next hurricane.
Okay. That's all. So it's not going to be what folks have used to seeing.
No,
They're going
sir.
to be different features. We just don't know what they are yet till more research is done.
It's going to be much better.
And it will be submitted as a hazard mitigation project to FEMA. And we are building today the hazard mitigation cost-benefit analysis showing the cost of all the piers that we've replaced over the years, plus the ones that we will have to replace in the future if the storms come at the same rate, and what that total amount is. And we'll ask FEMA to mitigate that by giving us more money this time.
I think Seymour Engineers has been computing what it would take to replace it as is. And there's some mitigation money, some additional, that if it were $1 million, they would cover us up to $2 million to do something that they won't have to do again. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. We're putting all the numbers together for FEMA with all the different scenarios so we can maximize the hazard mitigation money that FEMA has to offer.
All right.
Mark, I think there'll probably be some sturgeon studies part of this too?
Probably.
Okay, just want to check that.
Oh, boy. Okay. Long day already. Let's not get punchy. Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Appreciate it.
He's welcome.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Seymour.
Hang on. We got a few more questions. Mr. Deming?
This study, does the computation include only localized piers like the Lighthouse or all the piers that we replace, for example, the causeways? I just want to understand the computation because will some of the funding being requested for repairs include funding for the causeway piers? And if not, where are we at on those?
The problem we have with the causeway is it was not hurricane damaged. It was damaged by a tropical storm, a named tropical storm. And FEMA didn't declare emergency, so there's no FEMA money for that one.
Well, I think
What
what
we're hoping to do, Councilman, I don't mean to embarrass, interrupt, but what we're hoping to do is to use some of the money that we get quarterly from the port, for the port money, $375 a quarter, and put that into a project to either rebuild or at least repair and replace the sections of the causeway that are down. So basically to set up a separate capital project and to pay for it out of port funds.
Okay, so, thank you. The reason I ask is because he said the computation was to take into account for the cost for damages to the piers in the past, and then project
From Zeta, yeah.
Right, well, that wouldn't be the cost for damages from the past, that would be the cost for damages from one storm. So what you said was, I thought you were taking a time frame aggregate of what we've been incurring over time, and then projecting what it will occur in the future if the rate of storms were the same. And the thing was, I think it was Cristobal, it was a named storm. We just didn't declare a state of emergency, which disqualified us from any federal relief. But my concern is how are we handling the causeway piers, and thank you, Mike, for explaining that. And in the future, how are we going to incorporate the redevelopment of them and improvements of them so they operate at the same standard as the new projected Lighthouse Pier?
Right, and I think like Mike said, this is a separate deal, but what the driving force is what FEMA has offered as, an additional, don't build it back the same way because we don't want to have to pay you again the next storm, and I think that's the driving force, what Mark and Seymour Engineers have been doing. The ones where we know it got damage from Zeta and that would fall in this category, we're trying to get as much info as we possibly can in order to implement the designs that would prevent us from having to, go through these motions again, should we get impacted.
The Coliseum Pier is on the list as well as the Oak Street Pier. Those are two more that we have to do, that are possible Zeta projects.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, you had a question?
It's amazing we're talking about these hurricanes on Camille Day. 52 years ago today, Camille hit, in case y'all forgot that. Was you born then?
No.
I don't think so.
All right.
My question was, are we going to build this thing higher and use different polymers? Because the polymers we're using now don't work, the height don't work, and the same part of the pier flows down to the White House every time.
It won't look anything like that.
Yeah, but I mean, it need to be concrete, and it needs to be higher, without a doubt.
It will be, and, it will be something like,
Because, I mean, the last 3 times, each one was over 600,000, so we didn't spend $1.8 million, and we have absolute nothing every time we have a hurricane.
Yeah, we've actually researched the storm surges again, dating back to as far as we can to make that final call on the right elevation for the pier.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like it's got to be totally changed.
and the makeup of the base.
Every idea you have,
Yeah.
you put into it.
The biggest thing we're looking at is energy dissipation on the waves to prevent it from actually smashing into the pier, and also some flow-through decking that we found, that instead of pushing up and taking the whole structure with it and racking it, you actually lose a lot of the energy coming upward.
Yeah, because that one section flows to the White House every time.
Yeah.
Of course, FOPO used it on the bay, didn't we, FOPO? Put it on Oak Street? We
did
recaptured it anyway.
We actually we've used it several places.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? All right, we'll call for the question on the consent agenda. All in favor of the consent agenda as presented? That's a 7-0 vote. We'll go to exceptions now. Mr. Glavin, any exceptions? Thank you, Mr. Barrett. I have none. Mr. Deming, any exceptions?
I'm in opposition to MM, that's Mickey Mouse.
Is that it? Thank you. Mr. Lawrence, any exceptions? None. Ms. Newman, any exceptions? Mr. Guines, any exceptions? Okay, noted Mr. Deming's exceptions on item M. Thank you. All right. That brings us next to code enforcement hearings. Mr. Creel, thank you, sir.
Okay. The first item on the agenda, Kevin Bullard, 0 Larkin Drive. The property is still in violation.
All right. Just a minute. All right. Is there someone here to speak on this property, Mr. Bullard or anyone else at Larkin Drive? Come on up. If you would, you can just sit in front of one of those microphones and tell us your name, please, sir.
My name's Kevin Bullard.
Kevin Bullard, and do you need the address? She needs to sign in, huh? If you would, there's a sign-in sheet there. Just put your name and your address. Somebody will help you find it. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Bullard. All right, Mr. Bullard, is there anything would you like to, you could ask for an extension, you could explain the circumstances, whatever you'd like to do at this moment?
But, yeah, I was, had been waiting, to do what I had to do to it, to be, my truck, my personal vehicle, I had spent like 2 weeks on it, working on it, because I had to get the head shaved on it, the blue head gasket. That was one of my holdups to get me out there to take care of it. And then I had a right rear axle broke on the rear end, so there was a 10-day job there getting one rounded up and fixing that. And
Mr. Bullard, you could remove your mask, we'd hear you a little better. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just, I've had mechanical problems with my truck to go back and forth out there. I don't live on the property, my wife and daughter do. And, I stay over there on Canal Road. And, so, you know, just 3 to 4, you know, a month of time, you know, has been gone by that I couldn't make it out there back and forth with no vehicle. So that halted me, or, you know, delayed keeping it, trying to, you know, fix it, clear up the stuff. And, you know, I got some items out there that I've been saving for like a future project of a zipline park. You know, platform and stuff I had out there. The building and stuff, I played music and stuff, and I used to rehearse inside the building there, the shed. And, you know, that's not going on anymore, but the, you know, me, I guess people who want to, you know, might call me a hoarder, you know, or something. You know, I've accumulated things that, oh, I'll use this one day. I need this one day. You know, I've got my boat out there, and lately I acquired 2 jet skis that I need to work on and try to get them going.
So would it be fair to say that things have accumulated out there over the years?
Yeah.
Mr. Creel, has any improvement been made?
Pardon?
None at all, based on what your code enforcement's observed? Okay, are there any, and you said, Mr. Creel, it's still in violation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and there have been no previous extensions? Okay. Any questions or comments?
I have a question. Do you plan on trying to go ahead and get some of that taken care of?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Now, for last 5 days, 4 days, I was pretty bad ill, you know, sick lately. Well, I really knew the pressure was on to turn it up to, you know, take care of some of the work. You know, then I wasn't physically able to.
Have you did anything at all?
Yeah. My lawnmower, I got it going good. I mowed a little bit of the grass today. I got my weed eater and got out there and took care of around that front out there real good, and down alongside the driveway for the grass. And we were waiting on my son and daughter to sift through some items that we had brought out of a storage unit that we used to rent. We paid rent on a storage unit for over 10 years. So we finally got all them items out, and they were in 2 like covered up piles out in the front yard. And that now has been sifted through, and the rest of the remainder will get, you know, hauled away to the dump. And I've been there are some bunch of logs I've had out there I acquired from the last hurricane storm that I intend to cut in firewood pieces, you know, to make an income off that, you know.
Okay,
And,
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Barrett?
I'll propose we give him a 30-day extension to
I'd be
get it cleaned up.
greatly appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Barrett's made a motion. Is there a second? So there's a motion by Mr. Barrett for a 30-day extension and a second by Mr. Deming. Any discussion? All in favor? It's a 6-0 vote. Note that Mr. Glavin is absent.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. You can go.
Thank you, Mr. Bullard. Thank you, Mr. Creel. Next item is we'll open hearing on Terry and Margaret Cobb, 282 Hickory Road.
Still in violation.
Is Terry and/or Margaret Cobb present? Is there anyone here to speak on this issue? There being none, this hearing is closed. That brings us to item C, a hearing, Catherine Huber, 247 Bone Street.
Still in violation.
Is Catherine Huber or anyone present to speak on this matter, 247 Bone Street? Yes, sir, and you'll need to sign in on the sign-in sheet and then say your name clearly so the clerk can get your name down accurately.
My name is Alton Crawford. I'm Catherine's brother.
Your name is Alton?
Alton Crawford.
Crawford. Alvin?
Catherine's brother.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr.
He's in
Crawford.
Maryland.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crawford. And this property is still in violation, Mr. Creel?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Crawford, would you like to share your thoughts with us on this matter?
Well, I keep the yard up. I cussed it, okay? I cut it maybe about 4 days ago.
Okay.
That's when I noticed the sign there in the yard. And I got with her about it. She had talked to Jerry. And the reason why it got piled up like that, because this all happened during the pandemic, and she couldn't get down here. She said she was down here, all that could have been taken care of, but she couldn't get down here. And she wanted me to ask for you to give her an extension on it, and we'll really take care of it.
Mr. Creel,
Okay,
it's all that tree and yard waste, that's the issue, that's the violation, that's what's got to go. Okay,
Yeah,
Mr. Guines.
yeah, I think the issue is when a contractor come out, correct me if Mrs. Krill, if a contractor come out and cut up, that they are supposed to provide a dumpster for the cleanup. So whoever cut the limbs up, I think they need to go ahead and just put it into a dumpster. Am I close, Ms. Krill?
That's correct. What happened, and I've spoken to Ms. Huber a couple of times, she does live in Maryland, and she missed the deadline. These trees all fell in the back of the house, and she missed the deadline for getting them to the front property line. I asked her about a contractor. She said, no, it was not a contractor. It was volunteers that helped her get it out there. The problem is that the ordinance says that if you put this type of debris out by the street, it can't be more than 5 feet in length and it can't be more than 8 inches in diameter. And you can see that there's some full tree trunks there. So that's the reason the contractor didn't pick it up. Now, we're working with some things. We talked yesterday with Mike Leonard and Billy Ray about a means of doing this, because this is happening all over town. People are getting this debris out to the street, and we can't just leave it out there. I mean, if we have to pick it up and bill the owner or whatever, then we've got to work out a solution for that. But in this case, the property, she cleaned the property. The gentleman is correct. They cleaned the property, they cut the grass, but they got it out to the street, and it's just too cumbersome for the contractor to pick up or for Public Works.
Do we know who the contractor was?
Well, again, she said it was volunteers. It was not a contractor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Guines?
No, I'll just recommend, like he said, 30 days. We'll recommend 30 days and see if we can work out a solution with Mr. Krill. Maybe somebody can get some of it, and then the owner can at least get a dumpster to help alleviate some of the bigger debris. So I'll recommend 30 days.
All right, there's a motion for 30-day extension. Is there a second?
30 days, sir.
Mr. Lawrence?
A 30-day extension, that's what.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Okay.
All right, a 30-day extension, a 6-0 vote. Thank you. The next case to be heard is R.W. Development, 1816 Beach Boulevard. Is anyone here to speak on this matter? Any representative for R.W. Development here to speak on this matter? Mr. Creel?
The property is still in violation, but I would ask for 30 days on this. We don't get a lot of response from the Sun when we send a notice out, but usually when I call Mr. Woolrich, he'll get someone in there to take care of. So if you'd give me 30 days, I'll call Mr. Woolrich myself.
I recommend the 30 days.
All right, there's a motion by Mr. Lawrence, second by Ms. Newman. Any discussion? All in favor? It's approved on a 6-0 vote. Thank you. The next matter is Eddie Mae Smith, 238 Deloney Street.
Still in violation.
Is Ms. Smith here or anyone representing Ms. Smith here to speak on this matter?
Yeah, she's a elderly lady. I'm gonna ask for 30 days to see if I can contact the caretaker. She's got to be in her 90s, if I'm not mistaken. And just to get that caretaker.
I'll second that.
All right, so there's a motion by Mr. Gaines and a second by Mr. Lawrence for a 30-day extension. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yeah.
Still in favor? Going. Thank you. 6-0.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item F. We'll open a hearing on Excellent Holdings Corp., 395 Fayard Street.
Still in violation.
Is there anyone here representing Excellent Holdings Corporation to speak on the property, 395 Fayard Street? Any discussion or questions of Mr. Creel? You said it's still in violation, Mr. Creel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Okay. That being the case, I declare this hearing closed. We'll go to the next item, item G, Excellent Holdings Corporation, 876 Elder Street.
Still in violation.
Is there anyone here representing Excellent Holdings Corporations to speak on this matter? There being no one, this hearing is closed. All right, thank you, Mr. Creel. That concludes our code enforcement hearings. This time we'll move to the routine agenda. I'll entertain a question. Mr. Creel, Mr. Deming has a question.
Mr. Creel, with noticing, when you're dealing with a resident that's in a property, how do we notice? What's the noticing procedure? I'm curious because these ones like the RW Development and the Excellent Holdings Corporation, these companies that hold properties, when we go to the Secretary of State's website, are we notifying their agent of process, or are we?
Yeah, and in both of those cases, with RW and with Excellent Holdings, the certified slip came back signed, so yes, they were notified.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. I want to explore this more. I think it's outrageous that these corporations are relying on the city to cut grass and then add money to a tax roll that will take us time to recover. There's got to be some other punitive measure that can induce these people to take care of their properties more so than those that may not have the financial wherewithal to do such. But I'll talk to you more about that afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Creel. Thank you, Mr. Deming. All right, I'll entertain a motion for the routine agenda.
Moved.
Motion by Mr. Lawrence. Second by Mr. Gaines. Discussion. Mr. Lawrence?
It's, Walt?
Yes, Council. Bunny?
Money.
So we've got some good news. We work closely with MEMA, and we have 3 payments that should be here in the next 10, 15 days. Totals 3.872 million.
Total.
Yes, sir.
That is good news.
Yes, sir. They worked really close with us, and they did a good job teaming with us.
Stay on top of it. That's good for us, Get the money rolling in.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Lawrence?
No.
Any other questions on the routine agenda? There being none, I'll call for the motion to approve the routine agenda. All in favor? Still in favor? Thank you. 6-0 vote. All right, that brings us to a recess at this time at 4:03. Entertain a motion for a recess.
Moved.
Motion by Mr. Lawrence, second by Mr. Barrett. Any discussion? All in favor? It's a 6-0 vote. We'll take a 10-minute recess. It's 4:03. We'll come back at 4:13. We have a budget workshop. We'll cover the Port Department budget. We'll go through and talk about non-departmentals, see if we can get some consensus on the council, and then we'll discuss the tax levy. Thank you. We're in recess for 10 minutes.